Initially, when I talked to Lazer3D about the review of their LZX-8 case we were about to do, like back in April 2021, I was like, yeah, after the review is done, I will watercool that thing just because I can. Yeah, good idea. But even if the task I just put upon myself was pretty ridiculous considering I had basically zero components needed except for the case, I was determined to do it. And so it started. First job was to get a Watercool GPU. Very fortunately for my own pocket, I already got us a Gigabyte RTX 3070 Vision because I needed one for wide cases like the Acer cars. Now, you might think that this monster of a card is way too long for a tiny case like the LZX-8, and you would be right. But as it turns out, these RTX 3000 cards have really tiny whiny PCBs, like these are barely half the card. And this was particularly good for the video because I absolutely wanted to avoid using any older cards like my 2060s. So everything was back on track, except for the fact that RTX 3000 cards were so new that there were barely any waterblocks available, with most European or US based companies still not having waterblocks for a 3070 Vision until this very day. But everything is solvable. Enter Bykski, a Asia based company that makes various water cooling equipment, including a waterblock for a 3070 Vision. Great, so let's get one. On AliExpress.
6 months later.
No, wait. Instead of waiting around without doing anything useful, I decided to take care of the other stuff. Next up on the list, waterblock for the CPU. But not just any waterblock. Because we are already so much bound to the LZX-8 small size, I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could take care of the CPU waterblock, reservoir and pump at the same time? Well, look at that. Everything combined into a single little block. Amazing. It doesn't fit. With that little hiccup and a couple of weeks lost, I had to turn back to my old friend AliExpress. Unfortunately, I did not find any waterblock pump reservoir combo which would fit, but what I did find is the smallest reservoir pump combo I have ever seen. With around 6 cm width and depth, this cute little thing fits perfectly in between the front side of the case and the power supply. And while I was already at it, I also found the thinnest 120mm radiator available at 20mm, this XSPC TX120. Great! And to finish up my order, I just packed a whole bunch of different ultra thin 120s and one 140 fan, just to be sure that at least one of them will fit. After a couple of months, stuff started to arrive. First up would be the radiator. So I began with this one. While the radiator did fit perfectly in between the top fan spot and the mainboard, the fan will certainly not be crammed into there. There is just not enough space thanks to the PWM headers and the RAM slots. This was a huge issue and I did not know how to solve it. After about a week of existential crisis and crying myself to sleep a bunch of times, it happened. I had an idea. In order to make it happen, all I needed to do was to offset the fan diagonally for about 1 centimeter and everything would be perfect. For this, I would need to mount some sort of adapter on the rad, and do you know what piece of water cooling equipment got a piece of metal with 2 holes in it with about 1 centimeter of space and already pre-threaded screw holes? I'm so sorry, Acer. After mounting everything, it turned out pretty great. Sure, the fan is offset of the radiator quite a bit and this will certainly hurt performance quite a bit, but let's be honest, at this point it was not about raw performance anymore, but solely about the question if I am able to do it, and I really wanted to do it. Reservoir pump combo done, rad fan done, next up is the CPU. Fortunately, I managed to reassemble my Alphacool XPX Ice Block I used for my editing rig like 3 years ago. Sure, after being kept in a box for way too long, it got a bit dirty and I wasn't able to get rid of that burnt in blue color, but it will certainly do the job. The last step in the whole process was the GPU. Fortunately, the Bykski block just arrived, and that was somewhere around August 2021. We did a little video showcasing the whole process. So now we finally have everything needed to complete the build, except for a fitting GPU. Well, as it turns out, I kind of forgot that the 3070 Vision has its power connectors on the right side of the case. So there was no way in hell that this thing will fit in there like that. After another week of crippling depression mixed with the spoon of anger, I decided to not give up and perform the and I kid you not, most mental devastating and frightening action I have ever done in my life. Yes, I straight up soldered all of these power cables to the top of the card, making them come out in a 90-degree angle, meaning that the card will fit. I sincerely hope that I will never have to do something like that ever again. And this is the moment where shit started to hit the fan. While trying to complete the build, I had repeatedly managed to rip out one of the soldered cables out of my card. Sure, the first few times I quickly took out the card and just soldered it back on and pretended that nothing happened for the video, but after like cable number 5, I started to panic for my card. So unfortunately, I felt like it's necessary to stop this madness. I removed the card, soldered the cables off again and felt bad again. But at least my card was still working. But I was still not ready to give up, because in the meantime I managed to get my hands on an Asus 3060 Ti Dual Mini, a card that also happens to have a Bykski Waterblock available, and whose power connectors are not coming out in the dumbest location possible. So I immediately contacted Bykski, and they actually helped me out on this one. Thank you for this at that point. And off goes the whole process again. Water cooling video, testing if it actually fits, and let's go with the build. From here, the whole process was an ease. Everything was basically already pre-installed, and I just needed to fit the GPU in there and reroute all of the tubes again. And yes, this is by far not the prettiest tubing in the world, and yes, I should feel ashamed for the monstrosity that I've created here. But don't forget that there is very little space in there, and basically the whole central area is reserved for the PSU, so I needed to make those weird ass bands all around it. Anyway, everything went as smoothly as I could have hoped for, until I realized that the card is hanging out of the case. As it turns out, I blindly believed that every Bykski Waterblock had the same depth. And so it happened that I triple checked if I could get the card in from a width perspective, but I never even bothered to check the depth, as a 3070 did already fit. And it's exactly that 1 centimeter difference which now prevents me from closing the goddamn case. Damn it. Okay, utterly defeated, but not dead yet. I decided to go along with the project, even if I have to leave the case open. I mean, at least it would make for a great Instagram picture. And that was the moment where shit really started to hit the fan. While power cycling the pump and filling it with water, it turned out that the Alphacool water block I was using did not survive those years of lying around particularly well. That damn thing was leaking all over the place, basically pumping out all of the water that I was pumping into the reservoir. And I'm not talking about fittings, no, the the acrylic piece all around it was leaking. It was mad. And this means that I am again out of options. At this point, I have a completely unusable water block which is leaking all over the place, a water-cooled GPU which does not fit, and the cables are not even the problem anymore. This goddamn thing is just too deep to close the case. And this means that to try again, I would need a new CPU water block, a new GPU, and a new GPU block. And as unfortunate as I think this is, and as sad as this makes me, this is the point where I just have to admit defeat. I tried many times with many different components, but I was just unable to get custom water cooling into the LZX-8. I tried my best, but I lost. My sincere apologies to Lazer3D for saying I would do something that in the end I just failed at. But maybe in like 6 months, if I have a bunch of new gear and that I can swap out, maybe at that point I will return to the project. But for now, there is just no way that I would be able to do this.